Good evening, Professor. So I did attempt to do a dual shot with the webcam and screencast, but of course my webcam isn't working. So, however, here we go. This year, as you can see, is a blank lesson plan for the 3-semester block. And you start up top here with the name, title of unit, lesson plan, how long the lesson is, what grades are in the class that you're teaching there, and of course what subject it is. For me, that would be mathematics. Then we go to the central focus of the unit, starting with the essential literacy strategy focus. I'll switch screens here to one. Here's a sample, but sorry. This is one that I just recently did for my math methods class. And so you can see for the essential literacy strategy focus, the goal was for my class to work in groups to interpret word problems, specifically a tricycle race between students at different speeds and starting points. And their goal was to create a linear equation in slope-intercept form, and then, of course, connect that and understand potential real-life interpretations of the slope of a line and the y-intercept. The related skills, or skills that support the use of the strategy, is their ability to plot points on a graph, understanding of what a slope means in a linear equation as a rate. In this case, it was distance of meters per second, and then what a y-intercept is. In this case, it was their starting point. The content focus was to take a real-life scenario, create a graphical representation, and create the appropriate equation that represents that. I'm going to stick here with the lesson plan that I filled out. Saying it was a blank one I took and used it for math methods. And the next portion is the standards. So with this particular lesson that I chose, it covered this standard here, which was to write a function that describes a relationship between two quantities. And the second one was to create equations in two or more variables, x and y in my case, to represent relationships between quantities, graph equations on a coordinate axis with labels and scales. And these come from the Common Core standards that most schools are implementing. For my school right now, Grossmont High School, is only using the Common Core classes, the integrated math classes for freshmen, and then next year it'll be freshman and sophomore, and then the following year freshmen, sophomore, and juniors, and then of course eventually all 4 grades, freshmen through seniors. So next we get to the instructional learning objectives and assessments. Now, filling this out for my very first time, I did revert to the sample lessons that you had provided us, which were a big help. And as you can see, so this is the first sample lesson, this is the second one. It was a little bit of a different lesson, but you can see they identify the specific essential literacy strategy, related skills, content focus, and then had 2 standards that were listed from the Common Core standards. You go down, you see the instructional learning objectives. It's very explicit, specific what the learning objectives are, and then they give the informal, formal assessments, and I used similar here on mine, where to assess them for a formal, I have the students create a table on their worksheet containing a column for a 3-column table that contains slope, y-intercept, and the equation in slope-intercept form, or y equals mx plus b, on their table, or on their worksheet. before they graph it to help them get a better understanding. And then for the informal assessment, as I walk around the class, I help the students. I check on their work. They're in groups of 4, so I make sure that all students are participating and not that one student is dominating the group, as a whole. And then the final formal assessment is that, of course, students turn in their worksheets, which I will grade and then turn back to them. Furthermore, we have the language function and demands. And again, I used the templates, the samples that you gave us to assist me with coming up with the language function and demands. And as you can see here on the sample, it says students will reason abstractly and quantitatively as they investigate combinations of side lengths to create triangles, etc., which comes straight from the Common Core standards and the 5 strands of mathematical practices, which we follow with this new Common Core standard that we are using to teach our students. So we'll switch back to my lesson plan. And furthermore, we follow on to resources and materials. So for this particular lesson, the only resources and materials were each student was supplied with a packet of colored pens and markers, a graphing calculator, which the school provides, graphing paper, which they were to provide on their own, and then a pencil and the tricycle race worksheet, which came from the CPM online ebook that particular class is using. And they also were able to use their computers that each student has, because Grossmont is a 1-to-1 school, Title I. So each student gets a laptop upon entering the school, and they were able to use that laptop and use Desmos to help graph out the equations or what they thought it were, to check their work and make sure they had the correct answers and that all students in the group were on the same page. Now moving on to students' prior knowledge. That is the prior knowledge that students should have before attending the class that I was in. And that can be anything from what they were taught last class to what they brought in from, geometry or algebra the year before. And in this particular class, the students had been taught the equation of a slope-intercept form prior to this class, but I believe this was only their second or third day of graphing and using linear functions in slope-intercept form. And so then we move on to how we transition from the previous activity where they were just introduced to slope-intercept form to now graphing it, using a word problem to interpret it. And in this case, we did a quick review, or the guide teacher where I helped out did a quick review on how to graph a line in slope-intercept form. And we reminded the students what m in the equation y equals mx plus b, which is slope, and then of course b is the y-intercept, and then practice graphing a couple simple graphs. And then the hook and purpose for learning, the hook was that we used or CPM, I guess, it wasn't my idea, but the CPM, Common Core, used a tricycle race, which most students have participated in a tricycle or bicycle race. And so that kind of gave students the relation and caught their attention to really find an interest in this. And then we moved on from there to each tricycle racer had a, specific rate that they raced at. May not have been exactly realistic, but it was just for the case of them learning. So, each different tricycle racer raced at, 2 meters per second or 3 meters every 2 seconds. And every student got an individual card that gave them the details on what their own racer did and how fast they raced. and then they had to share with the other students how fast their race ran, and they had to put the pieces together in order to get the details for each and every racer, which helped the students, internalize and really understand and comprehend the idea of a slope and the y-intercept, because they had to explain it to the other students in their group. Now, with this particular class, we had to do some extra scaffolding to help some of the students that were behind, because there was a high level of IEPs and English language learners. So we created a table, an additional table that wasn't part of the worksheet, to help students understand exactly what the slope y-intercept and what the equation y-intercept, slope-intercept meant, because they had shown that they had struggled with it in the day or two prior to learning it. So, as you can see, I took a lot of the ideas from the sample lessons here, sample lesson 1 and then 2. But I spoke with my guide teacher on this particular course, and she helped me kind of plan this lesson plan out that I did for Math Methods. And I think overall the students did a pretty good job with understanding it. I walked around through the class and helped them figure out the different details of the problem, and I think overall it was a success. So that is the 3-semester lesson plan. Thank you.